Hi y'all, I'm Hazel the Heretic. Great to see you in person this time. And today we're going to talk about religious trauma. Have you experienced it? Do you know what it is? Do you believe it's real? Now, those are all very different questions that we're all going to explore here and dive more into what religious trauma is and how it impacts all of our lives. I personally have religious trauma, and the first time that I was asked about it was by my dad because a psychiatrist told him that his kids were suffering from religious trauma. And I did not know how to answer that at the time. I was just starting my journey of understanding myself on my own and coming out of a negative religious experience. I didn't really know how to explain it to him. I was saying oh, well, threatening kids with hell when they when you're telling them their dog wants to go live on a farm because you don't want to tell them about death. They're probably too young to handle that. I know I was 5. I remember crying to a teacher about cheating on a test that I actually fully gotten away with. So it's actually a Bible verse that I said I'd memorized. I forged my mom's signature. Anyway, I confessed because I was so upset and afraid, but it wasn't just a confession. It was a full-on panic attack. It wasn't just, oh, I shouldn't do this. I don't want to do this. It's more about, oh, I'm a horrible person because I've done that. And that got nicely recycled again when I realized I was attracted to girls. So it's a lot of shame and guilt that I experienced, and not all Christianity does that, but in the fundamentalist Christianity that I grew up in, and a lot of Christianity that I do see, it's a big part of the faith is remembering that you are a wretched, horrible sinner that deserves death, because how could God be a good God if he's letting all these people go to hell? If God was a human, he'd be a bad father. So, I don't know. Maybe that's just maybe just daddy issues here. It's really hard to trust yourself when you're taught that your heart is evil and wicked above all things. And a lot of times that's something that's taught generationally throughout families. My mom was stuck in an abusive relationship because of God, because she couldn't divorce people because God would be upset. And same with my grandma. I'm from a long line of women who were controlled by religion. Thankfully, breaking that cycle. But it's one step at a time, and it's a lot harder than you think, because a lot of it is in your psyche of how you were raised. And so there's a lot of mentalities, black and white thinking, extremist thinking, especially when we get into spiritual warfare and stuff, that messes you up. It can make you really anxious and cause a lot of issues. And I got diagnosed PTSD, so thanks God. Depending on the study that you look at, about 1/3 of people suffer from some sort of religious trauma. So if you feel like you might relate to some of my stories, definitely know that you're not alone. And a great thing to do is to reach out to a mental health professional or a community of other people that are going through it as well. And I would love for you to write about your experience in the comments as well. I love to hear what you guys are going through. It's good to kind of come together and have that community, which is a positive part of religion, but just with us being human beings. We can just be happy that we're humans together and don't have to worship anything. For me, I really struggle with black and white thinking. I struggle with extremism, and I struggle with a lot of self-esteem and self-trust issues as well. Now, trauma looks different for everybody, and the way it presents in every single person is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to talk about what it is, the definitions, what is it on a scientific level, what does that mean for us, and how can we make life any better if we have it. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a medical professional in any way. This is really my own experiences with religious trauma and how I've seen it showing up in life. And I would love to see how you are seeing it show up in your life or in people's lives in the comments below. Because I really think us sharing our stories and just having more open and honest conversations about this is really good and necessary. It's really great as we can support each other through this mess because it does get better. Now, if you've watched movies like Left Behind or Into the Spirit, then you probably already know what religious trauma is, unfortunately. Sorry. What is religious trauma? Religious trauma syndrome is, or RTS, is when people experience a really toxic or controlling religious environment, and it can cause long-term effects. It's like any other kind of trauma. It just is specifically in a religious environment that is trying to control you, that is toxic and causing a lot of harm. And a lot of times that can lead to lack of self-worth, a low self-esteem, a lot of lack of understanding how to express yourself, even sometimes as an adult, lack of sense of self sometimes. And it's all going to just depend on your religious experience, because trauma is going to appear in different lives differently. Now, I do want to talk about some examples of like what religious trauma could look like and some fun stories that I have from my life to express them. Lucky you. One of the most common ones is fear-based teaching. Now, I come from fundamentalist Christianity, but I think this is a common one across the board where, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm just ignorant on that one, but where a lot of times you are taught what you do is scrutinized on the level of your internal damnation. If I'm a child who you're barely okay telling me you flushed my goldfish down the toilet, that I need to follow all these rules and be good at all of these things and give God everything. I mean, I take it seriously. I took it seriously. I don't know. I think part of me feels like I was the only one that did it. And like no one else took it seriously, and that's why everyone else is still in it. I don't know. But when you're taught at a very young age that your reasoning for not doing something is eternal damnation, you actually never, at least a lot of times in my opinion, you never actually grow your own moral compass. You don't actually have a reason to not like kill your neighbor. If the only reason you're not killing me is because you'll go to hell, you're a terrifying person. I am not murdering someone to not go to hell or to not go to jail. Like, that's basically like what you're doing. You're creating like an eternal, like real shitty jail. I mean, we're in America, so. It's just not proportional to what people are doing, especially when like the whole New Testament's led by a guy who like murdered a bunch of people. Teaching kids that they're being watched at all times and things that they're doing wrong can lead to them being an eternal punishment is terrifying and not okay to do to your kid. Your kid can't handle that. They're fine. They don't need to know what fucking hell is, dude. They're fine. Just like maybe teach them to be a good person. And then when they're old enough to like have their frontal lobe developed and like be a human being that can make their own decisions, then you talk to them about it. It's crazy because for people that are all about like, don't talk to younger kids about sexuality. Fucking talk to them about hell when they're 3, dude. What are you talking about? You're scaring them with eternal damnation at 3. That is something that I've definitely experienced, and I know that it caused me to be afraid to be myself. There was some things that I couldn't help that were sins, like right off the bat, like my sexuality. There was a lot of things I tried to change about myself to fit, and it just showed how much of a lie the like unconditional love is, because there's so many conditions. If you're like, hey, follow me, love me, serve me, do everything for me, and then I'll give you all this stuff when you're dead. I feel like we're getting scammed. That seems like a really bad scam. Would you let anyone else say that to you? That's crazy. It's just a fear-based tactic of living life. And I think that when you live your life based in fear, it makes you a lot more volatile, makes you a lot more likely to blame groups of people and treat them shittily for things they didn't do. It's really easy to victimize yourself and see yourself as a perpetual victim. I think it's interesting because Christians, their whole it's like Christians will be known by their love. It's not true. Christians are known by their fear. I've never met someone more afraid than a Christian. And I've never been more afraid than when I was a Christian. That's too real. Okay, well, let me know if you've experienced similar and if you experienced any peace when you left, because I know I did. I experienced a lot of peace when I left. Oh, like that peace that I was always praying for when I was a Christian. But another really big one is the understanding of your own worthiness. I know that as a Christian, you're taught that your heart is evil and wicked above all things, and that you're sinful from the second you're born. A baby crying is sin some fucking how because they want their mom's milk. That's like a whole nother thing. That's crazy, the amount of normal human things that we call sins. It's crazy. When you have very strict rules about behaving and you're told that you're lucky that someone would save you, you're actually a horrible, wretched sinner and a piece of shit. I hope you know that. I hope you know that. You're a piece of shit. And you are very, very, very lucky that Sky Daddy came and died for you. It's just you almost have to be pressured and taught into, oh, I'm being given this great gift, this awesome thing is being done for me. Because why else would you fall for this deal? Why else would you give up your whole life? The one thing you do have, the one thing you have and have control over is your life. I mean, to a certain extent. And that's what you want. They're going to take all of that, your time, your labor, your tithe, your devotion, all of that. They get your life. And hopefully you don't just die. I know for sure, for me, my ability to have self-worth and self-trust was absolutely wrecked by Christianity. And the crazy thing about this one is it's not even just people. It's not oh yeah, I mean a lot of people did suck and screwed with my self-worth as well. But the Bible says it. The Bible tells me right from the start that I am a horrible person. I deserve eternal damnation, and I am lucky that my Father is going to get up his ass and come down here and die for me. And I have to give him everything, or else he can't handle the sight of me, and he will forever torture me in hell. Yeah, I don't know how you feel very worthy after that. And I understand the whole point is that you get your worthiness from God, not from yourself. Self-love is actually bad, guys. But obviously, you can't think you're above other people. That's different. But you should have self-understanding, self-compassion, self-care, self-love. Those are normal and healthy things to have. And if you're told the only self-esteem you need and can have is from God, that just genuinely sounds like an abusive boyfriend. Like a guy who's trying to separate you from all your friends. I'm leading into the next one actually. And setting all these rules and how you're gonna be and trying to fear you into this relationship, telling you you're not worthy enough. It really reminds me of an abusive relationship. As I alluded to, the next one is isolation from the outside world. Now, this can come in a number of forms. This can be physically keeping you separate. I only went to Christian schools growing up. I came from a pretty privileged family, and so they were able to do that, and they didn't want me talking to anyone that wasn't a Christian, so awkward, wasted a lot of money, but whatever. And they also wanted to keep away the media, especially in my household. Now, this is where my house might have been a little more extreme than your average Christian. They didn't let anything in the house that wasn't Christian. I watched so many, horrifying, oh my gosh, I read all the Left Behind series. Into the Spear is, dude. I was gonna, think about watching that and doing a review, but I don't think I want to put myself through that. That's horrible. And I wasn't allowed to see anything else because they thought that if I saw anything else, I would run to it. And I just think that if it's that fickle, if you have to keep them isolated from everyone else to keep them to choose you, then they don't want to choose you. That's not a choice. if you're isolated and basically told like, hey, you can have your last bastion of support and just join along, or that's it. Like, especially when that isolation is also like showing the outside world as evil. That was a really big part for us. It was public schools were evil, secular world was evil, like all these things. And I'm not saying like everyone's fantastic. Like, people got a lot of issues. I'm not saying like there's some evil people out there. But this idea that like we were the good guys and they were the bad people that didn't choose God. Now, that was always a thing. We were always like, it's technically not that like we're good and they're bad, but it's more like we're smart and they're dumb. I feel like it's more like how it would come out, because it would originally, they would be like, no, it's not that we're better. We're sinners too. We were just smart enough to accept God's deal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, at this point, it's like hedging a bad bet. This a lot of times can lead to social anxiety, panic attacks, struggling to like understand yourself in the world. Now, all three of these are pretty clear examples of what religious trauma can look like and how it can really mess with your mind. Please let me know if you've experienced any other examples in the comments. I would love to talk about it, because I know these are just three of many, many examples of what religious trauma can look like. A lot of people ask, is religious trauma even real? That was what my dad very much argued against when I told him about it. And at first I was a little unsure, because I was just trying to figure out my own stuff. And it was really hard for my dad to see how a religion that he loved so much could ever harm anyone. And I feel like that's part of the problem. According to mental health experts, it is absolutely real. They have done research and have found that religious trauma is just like other types of trauma. You can get diagnosed PTSD, you can develop anxiety and depression, it can cause this long-term guilt, shame, loss of self. It is absolutely like a huge mental health issue. And then it also is a nervous system issue. Trauma lives in the body. As someone who has diagnosed PTSD, I can tell you right where my panic attacks are. It is a very bodily feeling. And it's interesting, because as someone who was in religion for so long, I was very actively taught to not trust myself and not to listen to my body. So when I would have panic attacks, it would be hard to like really understand what was even going on. Now, as I've gotten a little bit better at understanding my body, I can definitely feel how the religious trauma has not only like hurt my brain and like my way of thinking. Sometimes I have to like be very purposeful to not like carry over certain black and white thinking or extremist ideology into my new way of thinking from my old religious trauma. People with religious trauma can experience flashbacks, they can experience hypervigilance and different types of panic attacks. I have absolutely gotten all three, unfortunately, at different times. And it's a lot to work through with yourself and your body. Now, it's not specific on religion. I came from fundamentalist Christianity, and a large percent of the world are Christians, especially in America. This is not just a Christian problem. This is a religious problem. And it's not specific to any religion. It's about how people practice, preach, and the doctrine that they have. When the doctrine is controlling your every behavior, not allowing you to think for yourself, or it is at a place where it's asking you to compromise so much of yourself, that's not healthy. I know someone that is subbing right now, and they're going through the process of learning that training. It's interesting because one of them were talking about, oh, we can't talk about politics in the classroom. How do we say anything if a kid asks us a question? And they were like, well, what we tell them is, we don't tell you who to vote. We teach you to choose how to vote. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with religious trauma, especially like passed down through parenting, is that it's not teaching you how to think for yourself, come to your own conclusions, and hold, even holding some of the values. It's teaching you the answer and it wants you to memorize it. And unfortunately, I'm not good at memorization. I think that that's like a flawed mentality right from the start, and it doesn't allow people to have their individual humanity and understanding and realization that we all see the world through slightly different lenses. Now, that trauma will come from any religion that is extremely punitive, that is extremist, that is seeing the world in this black and white thinking, a lot of these other things, and it'll cause long-term impact in a lot of people. I would love to hear your experiences, especially if you're not from Christianity, because obviously most of my experiences are. And I would love to hear about how your religion has potentially caused some trauma in your life, and maybe different ideologies that you've had to work through. Because I really do think that's one of the most dangerous things about like religious trauma, is that those mentalities that get stuck in your head, the black and white thinking, the isolating yourself from the outside world, that even if you change your religion and you keep those ideologies, you're still going to be in a controlled, toxic environment, even if it's a different religion or not a religion at all. So it's really about processing a lot of those ideologies and deconstructing it for yourself and deciding how you feel about it. Do you feel like this is moral and good? Is this the way that you want to live your life? Is this happy and healthy for you? And are you allowing yourself to doubt? Doubt should never be a sin. And I know in a lot of Christian churches it probably wasn't, but in mine it was. And that is the biggest red flag. If you can't question things, if you can't look up information about other stuff without getting pushback, if they want to keep you from knowing things, if they want to keep you from questioning, get the fuck out. It's not worth it. Now let's talk about if religion as a whole is bad. Now I know I'm over here wearing some horns and a pitchfork, and probably a lot of spite. So you probably think I have a pretty biased answer, and I do. I don't think that religion, though, as a whole is bad. I think that there are a lot of positive aspects to it, and I think that it can provide a lot of positive things to people's lives. It's really about the doctrine, the practicing, and the preaching. That's what's important, is people's ability to make their own choices, not trying to encroach on the lives of others, and not pushing negative mentalities on your kids that are going to cause long-term negative damage. I think it's funny because I think a lot of Christians say, when I bring up like negative things that Christians are doing, they'll say, don't judge Christianity by Christians, judge it by God. And I do. I very much do. I read the Bible and I judge him greatly. But also, a religion is judged by the way that people are practicing. I think it's kind of ridiculous not to expect that. When there is a majority culture around that religion, it is something to do with that religion. If most of the people in a certain religion are acting a certain way, or there is a large belief in a certain way that is harming other people, I think we have to see that that religion is harmful or has harmful tenets and things that need to be addressed. I do want to say that religion can have some very positive impacts on people's lives. One of my favorite parts about religion that I definitely really miss is the community aspect of it. Going and just being with other people that you felt like you could trust and hang out with on a weekly basis. My family was a little weirder, didn't have the best community at our churches because they were weird and small and had a lot of old people. But it can be a very good thing. And a lot of people use religion as a coping mechanism. And as someone who also needs coping mechanisms to survive in this world, I get it. Like, I remember when I was a kid and people would say like, oh, Christianity is a crutch. I would get so mad. I'd be like, that's such bullshit. Like, it's not a crutch for me. It's like God's important relationship that I have. And now I look at it and I'm like, yeah, no, at least when I talk to my mom now, the way, she uses it is definitely a coping mechanism for her life. It's very interesting. And prayer or meditation can be really good for people's mental health. It can be really freeing to release a lot of your anxieties and worries into the universe or to a God that you think is going to take care of you. Having all the answers is way easier than not. And I know they don't have all the answers, but more than I do. So a lot of people in a religion also get a strong sense of purpose. That's something that I know me and my partner have talked about a lot since leaving Christianity, is what is our purpose in life? It's actually hard. We have to figure out what we want to do now. It's very interesting. It's almost got a certain view of life. Before, when I was a Christian, I planned my whole life around that. And now I'm not. And my values are different than they were. And how I feel about the world and my place in it is different than it was. But having that strong sense of purpose that's more laid out for you is really nice. It's a lot easier, from my personal opinion, to be at the end of the day, God's got it no matter what, than to recognize the randomness of nature. And I think it is harder to accept that, if I'm being honest. I think that's fair. I think that's hard to make sense, to want answers. It makes sense to want to be given a clear purpose. But I do think that makes us lose a good bit of our, I don't know, I heard this poem recently. I was talking about how we have an animal of a body that we have to take care of and let rest when it wants to rest, let dance when it wants to dance, whatever. And I definitely disconnected from myself and my body to use that coping mechanism. So for some people, I think it can be a very positive coping mechanism to get through life. And for others, I can think it can be an unhealthy coping mechanism. I think it just depends on the person and how they're practicing their religion. A lot of religions also focus on volunteerism or giving back to the community. Now, this can be a really great thing. The sense of pride and community and getting together to care for those that are in need, or to have that community support maybe when, you're going through a hardship. That's fantastic. That community, that care for one another is the best. I think it's awesome. And that is something that religion can provide for people. Religious communities also are a big social support for people. It's a very easy social event. Some people go in and they get the heck out of there, as fast as they can. And other people sit around and they talk. And it allows you to participate in that community in a way that feels safer, and you are meeting on a common ground. Now I go to the library and I paint with old ladies. It's very fun. And I found that there's other ways that you can get that community as well. Religion is one of those really easy ways that are more baked into our society. And that's one of the really big positives it can do for your life is give you that community, give you that support. But in my opinion, all of that can be found outside of religion as well. I don't think that's a religion only thing. I think that's a human thing. Now, there's clearly also a dark side to religion, hence the religious trauma. And a lot of times, especially organized religion, can be used to push certain ideas or agendas that are not even really a part of the religion. It's all about these certain ideologies that are pushed for certain people's desires. Just like how the Bible didn't say homosexuality for the longest fucking time. It didn't get changed until that was a big issue in American politics. Everyone was fucking back then, dude. And at least the places Paul was going, some of the places Paul was going, everyone was fucking with every single hole. It's okay. And this Puritanian idea didn't really come into play until it was an important part of politics. And it's really interesting how religion has almost always been a part of politics, whether it's talking about the Roman Catholic Church, whether we're talking about Christianity and the Republican Party. It's very interesting to see how religion seems to take a cultural strong point and try to persuade and control based on culture and religion instead of by like rules and laws. But sometimes it likes to join with the government and like combine those two things, which sucks ass. I fucking hate that. It's really bad when people are put in these roles and specifically misuse them. I find it so frustrating when people get mad at drag queens for like existing, when I swear to God, I hear about a pastor that sexually assaults someone like every other week. It's ridiculous. At one point, I want to do a video and I want to line up the number of people that are drag artists, that are pastors, and that are policemen. And I want to see what the percentages for sexual assault are. I'm pretty confident I know. You can guess in the comments below. or don't. I don't know if that's bad or not. It's not good. Some religious teachings can also be inherently harmful and produce stereotypes right off the bat. If we read the Bible, God was cool with certain types of slavery a long time ago. That doesn't mean that that's moral. Like, I think I struggle to understand basing your morality on what some dude is telling you instead of looking around you at the world and assessing it for yourself and deciding what is good and bad, like what's causing harm, what's not causing harm. And religion is specifically taking that away from you. Instead of you being able to look around and decide, oh, this is hurtful for my community, this is helpful for my community, this is what I want to do in the world, this is who I want to be. They're giving you a list, which can be easier sometimes. A lot of times not possible. And it kind of just keeps you in this guilt loop of trying to meet all of these standards that you don't. And that isn't okay for them to ask you to. I know that in my church, there was also a ton of gender stereotypes. I think this is pretty common amongst different religious sects, and I know for sure I see it hardcore in Christianity. Oh my gosh, they used me for so much labor. I took care of so many kids' churches, but I just remember very specifically being told by my youth pastor, because I had thought about going into seminary for a hot second, that if I did that, I could only preach to children or women. I couldn't preach to men, because that would be me putting myself above them. I've always been a second-class citizen to men. And God, I swear to God, if I see that umbrella drawing one more time, I'm gonna blow a gasket. It just really does change the way you look at yourself. I think I really realized, like, if you don't know anything else, how are you supposed to even realize there's other answers out there? There's like another option if you like don't know it exists. And when I was growing up in that environment, they were very careful to make sure I didn't know anything else existed, which I think means they were cowards. If you had a good enough thing, people would stay. I think it's one thing to take scripture as like interesting, inspirational, philosophical, but to take it as literal truth that dictates your morals completely is just giving up the wheel. It's literally saying, Jesus, take the wheel of my life. I'm done. I'm going to be on autopilot and just do whatever. Like, do you not want to be a part of your life? Like, do you not want to actively take the reins of your own life and decide what you think, not what you've been told to think? And I very much wanted to believe it. So bottom line, is religion bad? Obviously I'm biased, but I don't think religion of itself is bad. I think it's a tool that a lot of people use in unfortunately negative ways to control and influence people. And I think that if it's done in healthy, not eternal damnation, not you're a horrible, wretched person, not allowing you to question things, allowing you to really figure out who you are and if you believe this, without saying you're a horrible person. I think that's like always almost what it comes down to. It's like It's very interesting to see what people say about you when you leave a cult. The number of comments I get that like, I couldn't have been a real Christian. No way. If she left, when like, it's just, dude, if I wasn't a real, I wouldn't have given a shit. If I wasn't, why would I make this video? If I didn't really feel all of this, if I didn't really go through all this, and there's no way you're gonna convince anyone that this is true. I think that's something I've learned, but I would still like to talk about it, and that's like why I want to make these videos. I want to talk to you guys about it and see what you guys are saying too. Like, this was such a huge change on my life. Like, it just like switched it. Like, I had so many plans, and religion just like, the way I see the world so different now, and it's a lot to process and work through, and it's hard because religion isn't bad, but a lot of people that use religion are bad. So we have all this religious trauma. How do we actually heal? It's a long process, and honestly, I don't know if it'll be one I'll ever be done with, but it does get better. It's step by step. It's not just about changing your thought pattern or your religion, but it's about building yourself back up piece by piece. When you change your religion, a lot of times that changes the way you view the world, the way you view yourself. And when that has been toxic for you, a lot of that process is figuring out who you are and building the you that you want to be instead of the you that you had to be before. It's not easy, but I want to let you know, if you're going through it, you're not alone. I went through it too. I'm still going through it. I don't know if it'll ever end, but now I make sassy videos about it on the internet, so. For a lot of us, this religious trauma has started since we were a kid. It built who we were as a person the first time around. At least for me, I based a lot of who I was and what I wanted off of my religion. It was everything to me. And so now I'm rebuilding. It's a process, but honestly a really rewarding one. I really like who I am now. I didn't before. I tried to. It was a lot of me trying to be someone I wasn't. It was a lot of me hating myself. And I still got panic attacks every once in a while, but I gotta say, I like this bitch better. One of the first steps to healing is understanding the impact of religious trauma. How has it affected your life? What aspects of religious trauma have really hit you and you're still carrying today? Religious trauma often occurs because of really rough teachings and controlling tactics that can lead us in a lot of mental, physical, sexual distress. And for many of us, that manifests in self-doubt, anxiety, guilt, shame, lack of understanding ourselves. This trauma can affect, honestly, every aspect of our lives, the way we make decisions, the way that we make friendships, the way we see ourselves. So understanding what aspects of your life were really shaped around that toxic religion. What beliefs do you have about yourself that might not be true? I would really recommend re-examining a lot of things. Something my therapist told me to do early on, which I really appreciated, because I was struggling to find things I like to do in my free time. And they told me to just try everything again. Try everything again. Things that you were interested in as a kid, maybe. But maybe even some things have changed. And I've found new things that I've enjoyed as the person that I am now that I didn't necessarily all those years ago. So it definitely takes a lot of self-reflection, understanding why you make the decisions you do, why you live the way you do in the world. And it's not always easy to figure out those answers. It's a lot harder than reading them in a book and just following along, I do gotta say. I liked that a little better, it was a little easier. Now, step 2 is rebuilding your self-identity. Now that you've kind of understand where religious trauma has impacted your life and how it's impacted the person that you are, what do you want to build for yourself? I mean, I was always like kind of a tomboy, but I wasn't able to present myself in a more masculine way like I wanted to. And now, as like an adult and getting away from that religious trauma, cutting my hair off was a religious experience. It was fantastic. It's never going long again. Maybe watch. This is gonna get played back 10 years from now. It'll be long, but I love my hair. It's just a certain amount of like autonomy that I have over my body by like doing small things, like cutting my hair short, like getting my cute tattoo of a sleeping cat, or like my other tattoos, like just small things like that would have been horrific sins that would have made me so anxious are parts that I actually really like, and I've been able to enjoy those aspects of life now and kind of rebuild them back into my identity. One thing that I learned from my therapist is to make a values list. This is something that I really struggled with because a lot of my values were all given to me. It's like these moral statuses of what exactly you're supposed to believe. But what did I believe? What did I value? And so what I did was I looked at a big list of values and I tried to write down as many as I related to, and then I wrote down as many as I could think of that weren't on the list. And then I narrowed it down to 20, and then I narrowed it again to 10, and then again to 5. And then I kind of have those top 5 values as something that I remind myself of when I'm making decisions. Because sometimes I'll go into a situation and I'll feel uneasy about it. I don't know what's wrong, but I don't know how I feel about the situation. And so for me, as someone who was religious, I would always kind of lean back on the Bible. I would start praying and like try to ask for God to do it. So now I've created that for myself, and I have the ability to look back on those values and decide, hey, is this fitting into the framework that I want for me? A big part of rebuilding your self-identity that I think is really, really important is to do it with a lot of self-compassion. When you're going through trauma and you're transitioning, especially, I struggle with transition, but I know some people don't, but I do. And transitioning, especially a big ideology like that, is going to be hard. There's going to be some cognitive dissonance. You're going to have to work through it. It might be 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. It's going to be okay. We're just doing our best. And as long as you're not hurting anyone, you're taking care of yourself, you're doing okay. We're just human beings trying to live. And I think that self-compassion is something that I severely lacked in my religion. There really wasn't compassion. That wasn't really a part of it. There was compassion that I had to give to people that I didn't like, but I didn't get any compassion. And I didn't know many other kids that did either, really. It was kind of almost like something that was used on kids to get them to like be nice to their parents after they beat them, but like not actually something that I saw many kids get in return. But that might just be my experience. Step 3 is deciding if you want to reclaim your spirituality or not. I know a lot of people that have like left Christianity or have gone through deconstruction and decide that they still believe in Jesus or they still have a relationship with God. And it might look different than it did before. That's really the only important part, is that toxic and controlling aspects of religion aren't there in your life. One of my best friends, she is a Christian, and I would say has more of a spiritual Christianity and I think a broader understanding of Christianity as a whole, which is really cool, from different cultures. She's not engaging in those toxic aspects of Christianity. She's not in a place where she's trying to control other people, where she's getting controlled. You can decide that you want spirituality. You can decide that you want religion. You want to be a part of these communities. For a while, when I was all through college, I was a progressive Christian. So I was still trying to make Christianity work, but with morals I could live with. So didn't work, but I know a lot of people that do, and it makes them happy. And I'm so happy for you if that works. For me, I chose not to. I really struggled with a lot of things I found as like logical fallacies with things, but it really isn't important. It doesn't really matter whether you believe spirituality, whether you don't. What matters is that you're a good and kind person, you're compassionate to others and yourself, and religion isn't a control in your life. It's a positive for you. When you explore spirituality, that can mean a lot of different ways. It can be with Christianity, it could be with other spiritualities. I like learned a lot about other religions when I was first kind of like leaving Christianity, because I was like, well, we got it wrong, maybe someone else got it right. Because, I don't know, just a way I wanted to learn more about the outside world. And I think that even now, I don't necessarily, I would say I'm agnostic, but I don't really believe in a God, so probably more like atheist agnostic. But I do think that like prayer and meditation can be really helpful. So sometimes when I'm really anxious or when I'm having a panic attack, I will pray. I'll pray. And I'll pray to the universe. I'll pray to the spaghetti monster. Pray to Satan a couple times. Satan's really good at cards, okay? So whenever my partner prays to him for cards, he always fucking wins. And I hate that. Satan doesn't like me at cards. He only likes my partner at cards, and I'm mad about it. That's fine. There is a certain expression and relaxation of just giving of your anxiety and your worry and releasing it. And so I think that can be a really positive thing. I think that people coming together and like singing songs and stuff like that can also create that community, that almost spiritual moment as well. And I think that's great. I think you just have to decide for yourself. Do you want to reclaim spirituality, or do you want to, is it not for you? And there's no wrong answer. Number 4 is relearning healthy boundaries. This is one that a lot of people struggle with, even that don't have specifically religious trauma. It's a trauma struggle in general. And setting boundaries is not just with other people, it's also with yourself. I really struggled to trust myself after religion, after Christianity, and one of the things that I did to help with that was to give myself small promises. Small promises that I knew that I could do, and then actually follow through, complete those promises, and then be proud of myself when I do. Small things like go on a walk a couple times this week, or I'm gonna cook this meal this week, or I'm going to do whatever. And then I keep them. And then I learn to trust myself more. It's actually very reinforceable, I found. A lot of religious environments have a very high level of accountability that can seep into overstepping boundaries. Now, accountability is not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you feel like you can speak on very personal matters of other people you don't really know, I'm gonna say that's overstepping boundaries. And that can really blur the line between guidance and caring versus control and dominance. While you're recovering, you have to learn to assert your own boundaries, deciding what you want for yourself. A lot of times before, my boundaries were, first of all, never respected, but second, just always secondary to what God wanted, which is of course always what my dad wanted. Of course. And I think a lot of people do that. They're like, I asked God, God said that I should do this. It's just what they want to do. Like, I don't have to do that, dude. At least I have the balls to say it's my decision. It can be hard to listen to yourself and decide what those boundaries are, especially if you're not used to saying no. A lot of religions very much punish saying no. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to question. You're not allowed to say no or push back. That's seen as like dissonance, I guess, or something. Like, I didn't know it was in the army. Ew. It's great to try to be around people that you know, you trust, that you can feel safe with, and then practice saying no with them. Set those healthy boundaries and work with people that you're closer with so that you can feel confident asserting them in all of the aspects of your life. Number 5 is finding support and building community. I did touch on this a little bit earlier, and I do think that community is one of the best parts of religion. So when you leave a community, you don't want to isolate yourself. I know that for me, I was already so like separated from the world that if I had isolated myself, I was already struggling to acclimate. It would have been probably even harder. So I would really suggest finding other communities, other people that you can hang out with and share a similar experience. I always recommend the library because I'm a frugal bitch and I'm not gonna pay money for things most of the time. So I've learned that if you go to the library, they usually have a lot of free like art classes, gym classes. Mine is like a woodworking thing, very cool. And you can do things like that to like see people in your area, build a community that way. As well as see if there's any like rec leagues or things like that. I know as an adult it can be hard to like start your own community, stuff like that, but it's definitely worth the effort because that's definitely a positive part of religion that's really important that you continue in your life, but with a community that is supporting and not full of judgment or fear. There are also therapists and different organizations like the Religious Trauma Institute that have specific programs for people that are struggling with this. I definitely recommend seeing a mental health therapist and seeing resources like that. I also recommend writing in our comment section or going to Reddit, Facebook, other places where you can join groups and talk about your experience. It can be really great to have other people and build that community outwards. And then you can have a community centered around who you want to be and how you want to be in the world, one that supports you instead of trying to control you. Last but not least, something I've mentioned a little bit before is really embracing that self-compassion. A lot of times when you're in a toxic religion that's controlling, there's a lot of self-deprecation, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of not feeling like you're good enough, and feeling like you need to change for other people. Now, that might not be everyone's experience, but I know it's mine. And embracing self-compassion, recognizing, as Peach PRC says in Dear Inner Child, a plate is just a plate. If it breaks, we can throw it away. It's really hard sometimes when you have trauma, when you feel the fear and stress in your body when you're going through something, but it can really help to remind yourself that you are just a human being. You're trying your best and you're not hurting anyone. Try not to hurt yourself and you're gonna be doing okay. The fate of the world is not in your hands. The fate of your soul isn't in your hands. It's okay to just be. And that's very hard for me, but I'm working on it. Remember that it's one day at a time. And something that I also remember from Surviving Alaska, it's a really good TV show, that I tell myself now all the time as like a way to show myself self-compassion is I would tell myself, slow is steady, steady is fast. Well, thank you for diving into that with me today. I know that religious trauma is a rough topic, but it's really important and it's a huge part of what I'm going through right now, so I want to talk about it. I really appreciate you guys watching. Please hit the subscribe button if you want to talk about more about deconstructing the world around you. I would love if you would tell me how you're feeling about religion. How has it impacted you in your life? And remember, if you're going through this, doing it one day at a time, slow is steady, steady is fast, and just remember to keep laughing through the apocalypse.